This is about writers in revolt. So I was looking for a book by Terry Southern to see if possibly he had written a collection of essays or maybe an autobiography. I couldn't find anything like that, but I did come across a book he had edited with two others, writers in revolt. That's as close as I was going to get, so I picked it up. Heck, I'm a writer, or a word slinger, as I like to say. I don't know about the revolt, but I do think that any serious writer most likely has a bone or three to pick with the society they inhabit. It's why Plato did not want any poets in his republic. Those doggone poets are more trouble than they're worth. Here is a list of authors in the book. It's rather long, too long to remember, but I'll supply it anyway. It's notable because it contains only one woman, and she did not make much of an impression on me. But then, she was writing about Jean-Paul Sartre, and those waters are too deep for me. Here are the writers in revolt. Allen Ginsberg, the Marquis de Sade, Baudelaire, Dostoevsky, Hermann Hesse, Artaud, Céline, Iris Murdoch, Malaparte, Henry Miller, Genet, Sharman Mortimer, William Gaddis, Evan S. Connell Jr., Charles Foster, Edward Dahlberg, H. L. Mencken, Hubert Selby Jr., William Burroughs, Ionesco, and Samuel Beckett. Murderers Row, Writers in Revolt. The stand-up equivalent is The Rant. I had read a very little of some of them and not heard of some of the others. At a glance, I could see there were a number of crazy Frenchmen in there. When some writer from France flies off the handle, they tend to do it with panache, great style, and much unrestrained enthusiasm. I did not understand many of these writers. They were on a different wavelength. I could see what they were getting at, but it was a struggle to follow them on their way. Allen Ginsberg has always been a stretch for me, for example, as well as some of those crazy Frenchmen. Maybe, in some cases, my lack of context was at fault. Most of the pieces were written in opposition, some of them strident, thus the revolt. Look, the people who write like this, stridently, they're nuts. I don't mean that as a criticism. They would say they have been driven to it by society. Some of them are full-fledged nuts, soaring off into their madness. Others, more reasoned, are half-hearted crazies, tentatively embracing insanity. There is a sense, shared by many, that society, the prevailing ethos, is, to put it mildly, a very low benchmark, a disgrace, a fraud, that gives to these nuts a credibility, a cachet, and a podium. And because they loathe the conventions of society, the bourgeois conformism, people will take up these nuts and call them heroes. The farther out they go, the tighter they will be clasped and revered. I found Céline here. Vonnegut mentioned him in Slaughterhouse-Five. I could see why. He is caught in a war, wondering how he will ever get out. This is hellish idiocy, he says. I am lost in the midst of 2 million madmen, all of them heroes, at large and armed to the teeth. It reminded me of Catch-22. Henry Miller, so beloved by many, is here, trying to fathom his new realism in fragmentary notes. Life is formless. Art should be formless too, if it wants to represent or convey real life. Those who loved him forgave his excesses, and that was a lot to forgive, as he is all excess. Mencken, snooty as ever, deplores a society that makes conformity the noblest virtue and a free-functioning personality a capital crime. It's hard to disagree with that. Ionesco, I loved him every word. Any system, he says, the moment it is established, is already outworn. Like any system of government, an established form of expression is also a form of oppression. Art, if it is true, has to be unpopular. William Gaddis, hailed as a genius, wrote a 1,000-page novel, The Recognitions, that no one read. Here is an excerpt. Listen to this. Still, like other women in love, salvation was her original purpose, redemption her eventual privilege, and like most women, she could not wait to see him thoroughly damned first, before she stepped in, believing perhaps that, as they do, that if he were saved now, he would never need to be redeemed. He goes on like that for pages. Overinflated, that's what I thought. There was a piece about William Burroughs, anointing him as a god among 20th century writers, followed by a section from Naked Lunch, which did absolutely nothing for me. Writers in Revolt are, especially because they are thorny, all about that wavelength. If you're tuned in, you think they are brave and marvelous. If not, well, they're just nuts.